Hello to everyone who has come. We will be hearing a talk from Lisa Braxton, who is an essayist, short story writer, and novelist. She earned her MFA in creative writing from Southern New Hampshire University and her Master of Science in Journalism and Broadcasting from Northwestern University. The Talking Drum was published by Inanna Publications in May 2020. She's a fellow of the Cambilio, pronouncing that right? Fiction Writers Program and a book reviewer for 2040 Review. Her stories and essays have appeared in Vermont Literary Review, Black Lives Have Always Mattered, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and the Book of Hope. And she received honorable mention in Writer's Digest magazine's 84th and 86th annual writing contest in the inspirational essay category. And he is also the winner of the 2020 Outstanding Literary Award for the National Association of Black Journalists. Talking Drum won the Shelf Unbound magazine 2020 competition for Best Independently Published Book, the 2021 Independent Publishers Magazine Gold Medal for Urban Fiction. And without any further ado, here is Lisa Braxton.
Thank you.
Here and David wants to ask questions.
Okay. Thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome.
So just briefly, I'm saying that when my book was published in May of 2020, it was like having Christmas and New Year's Day and my birthday all wrapped up into one. Because since I was a child, I wanted to be a writer. I loved reading. One of my first memories was I was being babysat by one of my mother's best friends. And I was maybe 2 or 3, and she gave me a bottle of soda. It was green, it had a label on it. And I saw a squiggly line like that and like this. And I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "That says 7-Up." And I was like, "Whoa, you can look at a shape and actually it'll tell you something." So I was just fascinated by reading and writing, and my mother would say, you know, growing up, "Lisa, it's a nice day. Why don't you go outside and go with the kids? The other kids, get some fresh air." And I said, "No, I'm staying in and read." I would read my Nancy Drew. I would read Charlotte's Web, all those books, the Hardy Boys, all of it. I was a big reader. And I said, I want to be a writer when I grow up. My mother says, "Well, Lisa, you can't earn a living writing books. You need to do something more practical." So when it came time to decide on a major in college, I decided to go to journalism. I figured I'll learn how to write, and I'll learn how to accept criticism, write a deadline, and learn how to be a writer, and then I'll be paid my way to writing my book. So I did that. I learned that, found out pretty early that it's very intense being a newspaper reporter. And by the time you get home, you're wrung out and you have no energy to write creatively. I enjoyed my work, and I also did radio news for a while. Did TV news for around 10 years in Connecticut and other markets throughout the country. So when you're a TV, you're moving around a lot. So in addition to the intense job, you're not in one place long enough to really sit and write or take writing classes. And it was just still storing in me this desire to write something that was longer. But around the time that I left journalism, I finally had some time and energy to actually write creatively. So I wrote some short stories for years, and one got published. At that point, I said, maybe I can do this. Maybe I do have some creativity there that people would like to read. And after that, I finally entered a MFA program, Master's in Creative Writing, at Southern New Hampshire University, because there in that program, you can go do a residency for about a month or so, but you're working at your regular job for the rest of the time, and they will coach you on how to be disciplined enough to spend 40 hours a week writing and not watching TV and those other things, and you have to discipline yourself and hand in a certain number of pages every couple of weeks. And at the end of that time, in 2010, I had my first draft of what is now the Talking Drum. 2010, and I thought I was ready for publication. I was so excited. I typed the end at the end of my manuscript, and the professor said, "That's not professional. You don't do that. You don't type the end." But I was sending it out to agents It was being rejected all over the place. But as it was being rejected, I was refining it. As the rejectors would say, why don't you start with this part or do this differently, or it's pretty boring or whatever it was. So this went on, for about 8 years of revising, and it was living my life at the same time. And around 2017, I got an email from an editor, a publisher from Canada, who I met at a conference in Washington, D.C., a writers' conference. And she said that, and I talked to her there only because I was determined to find someone who would like my book. So this conference is the Association of Writers and Writers Programs Conference, which is about the size, the book expo is the size of a football field, pretty much. I went to every single small press that had rejected me, and they all said, oh, we'll take another look at your book if you want. And I saw that Canadian press in the back of the room, and I said, well, they're a Canadian press, they wouldn't be interested, plus they're way in the back, so they must not be that prestigious to go with them. So the first day I walked past, kept going. The next day, still not getting any good response about my book. I said, okay, what the heck, right? So I went there, I went to her booth, I told her about my story, and she said, that sounds interesting. Why don't you send me your manuscript? And I said, the entire 400 pages? And she said, yes. And the next day, she was still there the next day, and I said, are you sure can I just send you like a flash drive or the electronic copy? No, I need to see the entire thing. So that Monday at work, I had the guys at my job in the print shop print up all those pages for me. Went to the post office, international mailing, all that. And it was about maybe February. Around July, I was coming back from Canada, as it turns out, from the jazz festival. My husband and I were driving back from there. So while we were there, I didn't have a signal for my phone. We come back and I turn my phone on, and he's driving. So I'm looking at my phone. He says, I looked at it and I said, Lisa, we would like to publish your book. I told my board of directors about it. They loved it. It is still available. We'd love to publish. I just couldn't believe my eyeballs. I can't believe I finally, after all these years, that someone interested. So I kept reading it over to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. And I was like, of course it's still available. Nobody else wants it. So yes, it's available. That was one of the most exciting moments of my life. And it's been like being the prom queen ever since. Because once you get your books published, it opens all these doors for you, like this, coming here, speak here. And I've been asked to do Zoom events all over the place with the senior citizens who want to hear about your book and do some journaling with them, or all these different groups. And then these different writing groups come together and they support you, because I'm working on during the pandemic. And then there are people who said, other writers have done very, very well. And they said, we just feel awful that you and all these other 2020 authors are coming out at this time. We can't do any in-person events. So they hosted us on their podcasts and their book reviews and all those kinds of things. And I also had a publicist who I hired, and she did a great job for me. So that's turned out very well. And I can tell you about the book if you want to hear about that. When I was writing the Talking Drum, I had this one scene to enter the program about a man and a woman who are at a bookstore, and she wants to get back together with him. They have a long relationship, and this is not autobiographical, but it kind of is. She wanted to get back together with him, and so she goes to this bookstore where they have a coffee shop, but she knows he's going to be there. So these 10 pages of dialogue, and I didn't know where else to go. I was stuck. I'd written myself into a corner. So out of desperation to be in this program and to continue with these 40 pages per week, I said, maybe I'll have a drummer. And this drummer is in the basement. And he's from Senegal. It's popped into my head. And that's what I did. And it went from there. And also, the neighborhood is going to be taken over by urban redevelopment. And it's going to take place in the 1970s. What happened was my parents owned and operated a clothing store in Bridgeport, Connecticut, in the late 1969 into the 2000s. But toward the end, the neighborhood was taken over. The exit ramp was cut off. It was like that neighborhood was like a ghost town. So it was a black neighborhood, pretty much. And a lot of what happens in this book comes from my own experience of watching my parents run their business when I was a child, and to see how that neighborhood has been just cut off from everything. And while I was doing my research, I found it interesting looking back on this now, because I see where I put some Black history in there also, because of the Black arts movement, which during the 70s, Black artists and others started to say, our art is very good and it should be appreciated on its own merit, not based on the European artists. So all these African museums opened up, and African music and African American arts were very big, and people went over to Senegal for the World Arts Festival. And that's where my character Omar is from, Senegal. And he meets up with Duke Ellington, the orchestra leader and composer. And Duke Ellington actually was there at that time. And so he meets up with him, and Duke Ellington gets him a scholarship to Howard University. That brings him to my fictional town in this book. And my characters Malachi and Sydney opened up a protest bookstore, which those things did happen back in the 60s and 70s. People were opening these bookstores, and they had poets come in to talk, and militants come in to talk about, you know, the issues of the day and do their creativity. So a lot of what I put into the book, it relates to so many things that interest me: gentrification, how people are affected by that, Black history, drumming. I took drumming lessons to learn that drumming is not as easy as it looks. I thought it was pretty there's a lot to it. So at this point, are there any questions about my book or anything about my writing?
I'm just excited to read it. First of all, I went to Howard, so when you said Howard, I was like, oh, yeah. And I see that there's a character named Bobby, and I have that in heritage, so that's a guy name. I'm not sure if he is yet, because I just.
Well, when you read about Kwame, you'll find a lot of things about Kwame, that he's very multidimensional.
Okay.
And we don't know what you should believe or not believe, but he's a very interesting person. He was one of the most interesting people that I created, and he's partially based on Kwame, who I know in real life.
Okay.
You never knew if you would trust him or not, is he in love or not.
And I noticed that the female character kind of had that intuition from the very first engagement. No, I just started. I'm agree. So I just started thumbing through it.
Okay.
I was like, okay. So it's already intriguing, and I've only like thumbed through 4 or 5 pages. So I would just say that my comment is I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to. I don't know when I'm going to find this in the future, but I think that what you said so far also connects, and I think when you do projects like this, it takes you to the person, like the person that reads it is going to also have a personal connection.
Yes.
Because you made it something from your experience and then a broader African American experience. So it's going to connect. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. I couldn't tell you how many people before the book came out, they were asking, what's it about? And I said, it's about urban redevelopment. They would say, that happened to me in my neighborhood. My neighborhood was taken over, and we were all the kids were playing with each other in the street. The mothers and the fathers would look out for us. They destroyed our neighborhood. They came through with this highway, and these are people back in the 70s. So they had to move out of their neighborhood, which was destroyed, and because of discrimination, they couldn't move anywhere they wanted to move. They couldn't recreate that somewhere else. They were just all separated. So many people have said to me, they'll just stop and say, yes, that happened to me. So I think that my book can appeal. It does appeal to a lot of people. Are there any questions online from Rita or Lori? Hi, Lori from Panama.
Let's see. You guys can unmute yourselves.
If you have questions.
Yeah, I would like to ask, is there any way to get a little bit closer to the microphone? Because it's a little bit difficult to hear.
Sorry about that.
That's up to Mr. Librarian.
Yeah, let's see if I can.
He says this doesn't work. I don't think this works. It's not from here.
Yeah, let me see if I can get this one closer. Hold on. Sorry about the technical difficulties. This is all tangled up.
Well, he tells me that very few library events, book events are done here because people, even though the book is going down, people are concerned and they don't want to really stay in the library or in public as much as they would normally. So it's not surprising that we don't have that many people here this evening. I could take this, but the other part, I don't know.
Yeah.
Theta, can you hear me better now?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
Okay. Well, maybe you can just slide your chair up. Yeah, that might, yeah. Okay. All right. I don't need to be behind her anyway. So, Theta. Oh. Can you move out a little bit more?
I had a question if you're still taking them.
Okay, give me a second. He dropped the camera. Aren't these Zoom presentations exciting? Oh my gosh. You know what? All right.
It's the hybrid events that are the hardest.
Yeah, hybrid events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That worked.
Okay. Don't mind me. I've been at work since 8 o'clock this morning. So, all right, let me have your chair.
Okay.
I think this might.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Theta, you had a question?
Actually, Lori had one and then I'll go.
Okay, hi, Laura. Hi, Lori. Lori's also
hi.
a librarian in Braintree.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late. I was hoping it was 6:30 when I realized I missed the beginning. I don't know if you already spoke about this. I've just started reading the book. So of course I don't want any spoilers, but I was wondering how much your book has to do with the marriage relationship or the relationships between the couples that are in the beginning of the book.
I would say that the marital relationships with all three couples figure prominently throughout their stories. That's a big part of the story too. And it's because how do the powers that be that they make the decisions to take a neighborhood, they don't just destroy your community, they can destroy or damage your marriages, your relationships. So I do go into that too. Yes, that those threads of the marital challenges are woven throughout the book.
Thank you.
Theta?
I had bought the book several months ago to add to my giant TBR pile because it interested me, and I'm only on chapter 3 right now. But what I'm curious about, I believe I heard you mention that your parents were in Richmond, Connecticut, and it sounds like I live in Connecticut, that 84 did something and cut off the exit, because it looks to me like Richmond is a little bit of a part of Southington. So curious about your choosing a setting in Massachusetts. What drew you to that fictional location?
I wanted to do something on the Eastern Seaboard. And for me, it didn't matter. There's so many towns and cities that have gone through the same thing. My hometown of Bridgeport, Connecticut has gone through that, as well as you see all kinds of cities along the Atlantic coast that have gone through being mill towns and factory cities and that are dying. So I was trying to choose the state where I live, and that way people in Massachusetts for marketing purposes would be interested in the book. I could have had it be Connecticut, or it could have been another state along the East Coast. But I said, well, if I make it Massachusetts, then people here will be thinking, well, is this, this place or that landmark? But for marketing, it was better for me. And as it turns out, when I look at my sales, the big majority of the books are sold here in Massachusetts.
And that makes sense. And I apologize if I misheard Richmond for Bridgeport, but because one of the things that I more associate with Massachusetts is, declines of the textile mill towns, towns being turned from, the small town field, as you said, with gentrification. So to me, it makes more sense that I link those things more with Massachusetts than Connecticut, perhaps only because where I live in Connecticut near Hartford. But thank you for explaining that. And I'm glad that it's drawing in more people from Massachusetts.
Well, I am too, because I'm not a native of Massachusetts. I've been here about 20 years now.
So I'm glad that people here in Massachusetts are supporting my writing and getting something out of my writing. Yes.
Two things. Was there anything that maybe the publisher or one of the companies that rejected the manuscript wanted you to change, that you were like, this has to be the story? And was there anything that they suggested that you think was like really, really beneficial? Like having that experience kind of brought a lot more texture to the story, or something that you hadn't thought of that really made it better?
Well, that's a little tough to answer, partially because one thing that happened was my publisher is Canadian. And so when the other rejectors didn't get deep enough to say what you shouldn't have or shouldn't, so that experience was with my publisher, and I got the first draft after it was set, all set in pages, and she's spelling like Canadians spell, labor, L-A-B-O-U-R, color, C-O-L-O-U-R, on and on and on. And I said, you are trying to appeal to a U.S. audience. They have maybe 2 or 3 other U.S. authors in their list. And I know you're trying to appeal to the U.S. readers, but if you use the Canadian spellings, that's going to trip people up. And my husband says, oh, but it's your first book. People don't understand. I said, I know how it is when I read. I don't want to be tripped up by, oh, this is a Canadian or this is English, or I want to be able to read smoothly through it. So I talked to the publisher on a Friday about that, and she said, let me think about it. And then on Monday, she called and said, I will honor your request. We'll use the U.S. spellings of those words. I said, thank you. One thing I'd wished I'd gotten the U.S. publisher, only because Canadian history and U.S. history are, the 2 different histories. And I don't know that she had all the sensibilities of the Black Power movement and those things to use that insight with the editing and suggestions to me. But I think it came out fine. But I would have liked my next book. I want to have a U.S. publisher editor look at it, because the Canadian experience is different from the experience here in the U.S. I'm working on another one. It's historical, that takes place in 1850s in Beacon Hill, because there was a free Black neighborhood there in the 1850s, 60s or so. The North Slope was all Black, and the South Slope was more of the white upper crust. A lot of the people in the North Slope did domestic work for the people on the South Slope, and whatever else they did. They had other professions too. But I have written about 400 pages. My life has just been very challenging in the last 4 or 5 years. And I put it down because I can write shorter pieces, and the longer piece is like, I have to wait till everything. My mom passed away. My father passed away. COVID, my husband lost his job. I lost my job. So I said, I think I'll just let this sit for a while, and I'll do some shorter pieces. And maybe later this year, I'll get back to it. Was that your question? Yeah. So what I have going on here is that these free Black people up here, there's a person in the South who's a slave, who's an enslaved African, who causes havoc for a good reason among a certain couple who live up there on Beacon Hill. So I've got all 3 characters written, 400 pages, but I have it to the point where she needs to get to Boston. I have to figure out a way to get her to escape where she is, sneak out on a ship or whatever it is, get her up north. So that's where I am. And hopefully later this year, I'll have time to get my mind, just absorb, sink back into that world and those characters. Do you have any questions, sir?
Yeah, so your mother was alive when you book.
She was, yes. Yes, because what happened was interesting, I'll just be personal here. My mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer at the same time, within the same 2 weeks, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was saying, I hope my book comes out before I die. But, I was afraid I was going to die before the book came out. I was going back and forth to Bridgeport, looking after mom with her hospitalizations. We didn't know, how that was going to go. But Mother's Day of 2020, I drove down to Connecticut with the book. And at that point with COVID, we didn't know how contagious it was. And my mother was already compromised because of the cancer. So I said, I drove down, surprised my mother. I told my aunt was her caretaker. And I told my aunt, can you be over at the house at that time? We're going to come down. And so my mother came to the door. My aunt opened the door. My mother had her mask on and I had mine on. And she opened, I said, I'm not coming in. I'm not coming in. But I want to show you something. So I opened up my book and with the dedication for my parents. And I pushed it up against the screen door so she could see it. And she was so happy. My father was upstairs and he's coming down the stairs on his cane. He had the biggest smile on his face. That was the best moment, I would say, of my life, was to finally, because my mother would say to me as a child, that's great, you love to read, Lisa, but you should be outside playing. You can't earn a living writing books. People who write books are independently wealthy. This is back in the 1960s. And that's the way it was. Things have opened up now, but they were that way. And I was like, I can't be rich. I have to be rich to write a book. And that's why I went to journalism. But to finally, after all those years of what I said all the time, and to show that to her, that meant so much to me. So that was October she passed away. So she was there for that. And I'll tell you one more short little story that once we found out that she wasn't going to make it. That was about in September and I was out of work. So this worked out well. I went to Bridgeport and I just moved into to the bedroom. Dad, he's kicked upstairs. I'm in the bedroom with mom. She has her hospice bed. My sister came up from Maryland. We're there. One day my sister was out somewhere. No, I'm going to tell this part. And I was in the room. My mother gave me like $2, like $2 bills. And I said, what do you want me to do with these? And she says, I'll put them right there. Put them, and so I put them in between. I put them inside of my book, a copy of The Talking Drum that I'd given her. And then later on, a few days later, and she's still lucid, but she's, the cancer is, you could tell it was spreading. And she says, oh, Lisa, I have something for you. And I said, what? Yes, I got some money for you. I said, the money that's by The Talking Drum? She said, oh, yes, The Talking Drum. She was so proud of me, just so proud. I mean, she was almost unconscious at that point, but so giddily proud that I'd written that book. And that was another special moment. So yes, both parents. And then my father, he passed away in September. And before that, he said that we would Zoom with him from the assisted living place in Connecticut when we weren't able to visit. And he said to me over Zoom, he said, I've read to page 36 because he had dementia and Parkinson's. And I think that the caretaker there, the staff, one of the people who works, that said that she read with him or read to him. He's like, I read to page 36. And I'm thinking, well, with dementia and Parkinson's, that's a real achievement. And he was very proud as well. So that both parents got to see that and to enjoy that before they passed away. Yes, that was a blessing. And I think about that sometimes, how my mother was like, yes, The Talking Drum. She was just so happy. She was so happy. And she also told me how proud she was of me. And that I think about that. That helps, when you're grieving, that helps when you can think about things like that. Any other questions about The Talking Drum? Anyone?
I had another one.
Oh, wait, Lori. Yes, Lori.
Oh, unless someone else had one.
Oh, go ahead, Lori.
Well, I was wondering if you had read the book by Alyssa Cole, When No One Is Watching, that's set in Brooklyn with this, the urban redevelopment theme. And I wondered if you've been in touch with her at all, or has there been any, it seems to me like if you like her book, you'll like your book, that kind of thing.
I see. I hadn't thought about that. If you didn't hear, she was saying, have I read Alyssa Cole's book, When No One Is Watching? Funny enough, Lori, I read that about 6 months ago just to read it. And my church book club is reading that for our meeting on Sunday, because I said, it's a great book, let's read it. And I'm the facilitator, I'll be asking the questions. So you were saying if I were to tag team in some way or with her, because we have the same theme in our books?
Well, I just wondered, often we try to think of books that are like other books, so that if you like this one, you might like that. And I haven't really read yours thoroughly, I haven't read it through yet, so I don't know how much element of suspense, but it seems to be there is some there with the mysterious fires. So I just didn't know how they compared in your mind, whether they would be associated and similar in theme, or is that all that they have in common?
Well, I'll say this much, Lori. Thank you for that suggestion. I will make them compare. When I go on social media, I'll say, if you like when no one is watching, you'll like the talking drum. So I'll do that myself. And I think I'll try to reach out to her. I don't know if she would. She's like a writing machine. She's written a lot of novels. I mean, sometimes I think people who've done so much, they're not going to talk to me, but they might. So I will reach out to her and see if I can talk to her. That's a good idea. It's very popular. But you all don't even have my book here.
Yeah, well, we have ordered, unfortunately.
Okay.
Well, no, not unfortunately. But unfortunately, it's been back ordered.
Can you take one of those? And I have books here, by the way. Can you take one of those and put that in circulation?
Yeah,
Okay, I'll donate that.
we ordered 6 copies and then they all were backward.
Oh, my
I
goodness.
realized that they weren't going to be here before your event, just last week, and I was trying to see if we could get them in more quickly.
Okay,
But they are coming.
good. Yeah, well, you are welcome to have one for the library.
So I just started the book myself. I'm about maybe 20 pages in.
But you bought a copy?
I don't, I was going to buy a copy tonight.
No, but you said you're 20 pages in. So how'd you do that if you didn't?
Oh, I checked it out from another one of the libraries.
Okay, in Brockton, or just curious where they have it?
Which one was it? I apologize, I can't
That's
remember.
okay.
I put it in.
That's okay.
Um,
Did you have a question about the book?
Yeah, I was going to ask, I know you said your parents, I think, opened the store in, I was reading a little bit on your website about, their opening the store.
Yes.
And I was wondering if the 2 main characters were to some extent influenced by your parents.
Yeah, to some extent, the 2 main characters, Sydney and Malachi, are influenced by my parents. I remember many times my mother said, your father is too nice to people. They didn't agree on how to run the business. And there is a scene or 2 in there where Sydney disagrees with Malachi, but the man has the last say. At least back in 1969, he did. And so did my father. So, so I put some of their arguments, a little bit of their arguments into the book. Eventually, my mother left. She left the store and went and got her bachelor's and did something else because she just said, like, we don't agree on how to run this business. And if we're going to have a marriage, we're not going to have it. I have to do my own thing. So she had to eventually. And when you get to the end of it, you might see where Sydney has to make a decision too about her future.
Yeah, I did get that sense from what I read. That he was, her parents, Sydney's parents, were saying, "Oh, Malachi is academic. What does he know about running a business?"
Exactly. So that I drew that from personal observation of mom and dad. Any more questions?
I have a question. It's not related to the book. You said you were a journalist. What did you do with paper, or did you do?
Oh, I was a newspaper journalist in Richmond for the Richmond newspapers. And then before that, I was on the radio in my hometown, radio news announcer and reporter. Then I went into TV, went to grad school, then television in Champaign, Illinois, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and then to Norwalk, Connecticut, to a cable station, then Hartford, Connecticut. Then I said, I'm done. That was 9 years. I was leveling off. I was not getting better, and I was not getting a big salary. I was actually going into the hole, trying to pay for parking and driving to my job. So I just said, and so I applied for public affairs work in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York. And I got hired in Quincy at the National Fire Protection Association. And then I left because they shrunk my department before COVID, that months before COVID, they shrunk from 12 people to 2. And I was one of the people they had to let go. So, but I'm working again, and I love my new job.
A random question that's also not related to the book, but did you happen to know John Hall, who I think used to work for the National Fire?
John Hall?
Yeah, I think he worked for the National Fire.
That name sounds, was he an engineer?
I think he was a manager.
I don't know.
He's a friend of my grandmother's. That's why
Okay.
I asked.
That name sounds very familiar.
Yeah, I think.
Didn't he do statistics?
That sounds right.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He would get these, he had Star Trek stuff, didn't he, in his house?
Yeah.
Okay. How's he doing?
I haven't actually seen him.
Okay. He's a former coworker, big Star Trek person, and he has a whole room devoted to all the costumes, all the, the suits of the original Star Trek. comic books, everything in this one Star Trek room in his house. And so he would invite us all over for a holiday dinner. And he showed me his, it's like almost the size of this room, all this Star Trek stuff, but you know, whatever. Teach his own, right?
Yeah.
Right. Any other questions from anyone? Movies?
Check on the Facebook chat.
So
I would-
talking about the story, visualize characters, right?
I would love to have it made into a movie. There's been no interest so far. I think because part of it is if you're published by, if you have an agent and you're published by a major house, that's a gateway to possibly getting a movie done. But for me, with a small publisher that's not a US publisher, I don't see that happening. I'm on a Zoom call with a group called People of Color Writers, and all these other writers who are on the call with me, who are doing young adult books. They're all getting Disney contracts and TV shows, Disney Plus TV shows, all of that.
That's what I'm asking. 'Cause it's
Yeah.
like a big demand. Netflix is looking for it.
They need shows.
But I don't know how this works, but, like the way that this show, what Will Smith used to be in, Bel
Oh,
Air.
yeah, Fresh Prince, yeah.
Yeah, so you know, Peacock has a show called Bel Air now from Fresh
Mhm.
Prince. My daughter was telling me that basically it happened because a guy did a trailer. He just created like a potential of what it could be. So that's another route, like, because it created demand and he needed to do it for a school project
Mhm.
or something. Anyway, it was him using his craft to show off his skills from his own imagination. And so now people are kind of adapting that and partnering with people who need to create something and giving them your story. And then they go and create this trailer and it gets a buzz. So I think, you know, just like the publishing houses, and the opportunities to get your book to market is different. I think that because there's a high demand, if you just figure out how to get a trailer done, sometimes that can bypass it. It may not be this, but it could be like, you know, some other type of.
And I will say that the women and men who were on that Zoom call were all Asian except for me. And I think there's a more of a demand,
I'm sorry.
but they're more people of color. This is just a Facebook group, a multiracial group, but all the other Black people dropped off. I don't know why, but everyone on the call I was with this month and last month are all Asian, and they're all getting shows. I'm thinking that that's part of what's the demand is for more Asian characters on television and cartoons, and that's why they're getting these contracts. And they're saying, well, I don't know what they're going to name my show. They can give a show. I mean, just be happy about that. But that, I think sometimes it's like that. Sometimes they're looking for a certain ethnic group or this timing. So yeah, I would love to see that my book made into a movie. So, but I don't know. I've tried. I've contacted certain people, certain organizations, but nothing. So there are millions of books out there that are so good, but they don't get made into anything. A lot of it's luck, I think.
And timing, like
Yeah.
you said, because the demand now is for more, which I love. I love to see diversity, like period, because I think it's only fair that people get some equity in what their kids get. So I can see that as a need. But I love to see it, but I haven't read it yet. From what you're telling me, I think that I could see when I read.
Yes.
I visualize the characters.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, I can see that as a need.
All right. Well, I guess we can wrap it up. It's close to 7 unless there's, Theta.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Was there a theme or a topic or a point you wanted to address that you ended up not being able to put in the book?
Yeah, let me think about that. No, I was able to put everything I wanted to put in. I wanted people to understand how urban redevelopment can destroy people, how it can be a good thing, but at the same time, people's lives they uproot. Some people who are in a neighborhood so long and then they have to move, they don't survive it. But I think because I'm with a small press, everything I wanted to say in that book, I got to say it all.
Fantastic. I am so excited to keep reading it.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. Thank you for your support. Okay, that's it then. Well, thank you all for being here. You can take a look. If you can purchase one also if you like, sir. So thank you. Thank you for being here, Theta and Lori.